The courtroom door felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of the past 6 months pressing against it. Or maybe it was just me. Sweaty palms wrapped around the cheap plastic handle of the laptop I'd bought on clearance 2 years ago. The one with the flickering screen and the loose hinge. It was all I could afford after my boss fired me. I stepped inside and scanned the room. And there he was. Andrew Langston, CEO, my former boss. The man who used to call me the girl with potential before he took everything I built and stamped his name on it. He sat confidently at the plaintiff's table in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my rent. His attorney, a polished man with silver hair and a calm smirk, whispered something in his ear. Andrew looked up, saw me clutching my battered laptop like a lifeline, and laughed. Actually laughed. "You're finished," he mouthed. His smile widened when he noticed my lack of counsel. He'd assumed I was walking into this alone and unprepared. That I was just some desperate former employee trying to fight a multi-million-dollar company with nothing but a glitchy laptop and a trembling voice. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was trembling. But not for the reason he thought. I walked to the defendant's table, set down my laptop, and took a slow breath. 3 folders inside my bag. Blue, red, and yellow. Tabbed, labeled, organized. Andrew had no idea what was in those folders. No idea how hard the next 3 weeks had been. No idea what I'd discovered. And before we go any further, you need to understand something. I never wanted to end up here. The day Andrew fired me, it wasn't personal. At least that's what he'd claimed. "Restructuring," he said, even though I'd spent 4 years building his company's flagship software system. Every line of code, every internal tool, every algorithm. My system was the backbone of his entire operation. But the real punch came 2 weeks later, when a courier delivered a thick envelope to my tiny studio apartment. A lawsuit. Andrew was accusing me of violating a non-compete agreement and stealing his intellectual property. He claimed I had taken proprietary code with me, a code base I had written from scratch. I knew why he was doing it. He wanted to make sure I could never work in the tech field again. Not for a competitor, not for myself. He wanted to crush me before I became a threat. And at first it worked. My job interviews dried up the moment recruiters saw the pending lawsuit. My savings disappeared within months. I sold furniture, picked up temp work, shared meals with the neighbors who took pity on me. I cried in the shower so my roommates wouldn't hear. But here's the thing about losing everything. Eventually, fear stops controlling you, and something else takes its place. Clarity. 3 weeks before the hearing, during one of my late-night panic spirals, I opened the original files I'd created during my employment. I wasn't looking for evidence. I just missed the work. Missed the piece of myself that had been destroyed the day Andrew signed the termination papers. That's when I noticed something. A detail I'd forgotten. A detail I'd brushed off years before. An email from Andrew's predecessor. Timestamp, my 2nd year at the company. The subject line, patent paperwork. Please confirm your legal name for filing. My heart had pounded so loudly I thought the walls were vibrating. I opened the attachment. And there it was. Patent application 7-423-8. 8B inventor, Mia Rodriguez. My name, not Andrew's, not the company's, mine. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Just internal paperwork for a possible filing. But the system I had built wasn't just proprietary. It wasn't just valuable. Andrew had told investors, repeatedly, that he held the patent. He didn't. Because it had never been transferred. Because it had never been reassigned. Because the company forgot to finish the process. And the patent, once finalized 2 years later, was still under one name. Mine. I spent days verifying it. Calls to the patent office. Searches through public records. Consultations with a junior IP attorney who owed a favor to my friend. The result was the same every time. I didn't just write the algorithm. I owned it. Fully. Legally. Irrefutably. And Andrew had sued his own inventor. That was the moment everything changed. I closed my binder, printed every relevant document, labeled each exhibit, and waited. I didn't countersue. Not yet. Because the courtroom would be the stage where truth landed hardest. Back in the present, the bailiff stood tall. All rise. The judge walked in, a woman with sharp glasses and sharper eyes. She glanced at the case file and frowned slightly at the imbalance. The corporate legal team on one side and me, alone, on the other. She took her seat. Case 3426 L. Langston Tech versus Mia Rodriguez. The plaintiff alleges violation of a non-compete agreement and misappropriation of intellectual property. The judge looked at me. Ms. Rodriguez, are you represented by counsel? I stood. No, Your Honor. I'm representing myself. A murmur rippled through the room. Andrew smirked again. The judge nodded for the plaintiff to begin, but my hands were steady now. The folders were ready. And the truth? My truth was about to take center stage. Because Andrew had no idea that the patent he claimed I stole had never belonged to him. And when I said those words out loud, when the judge opened the file with my name stamped across the top, Andrew's smirk would disappear. Andrew's attorney rose with the kind of confidence that comes from years of getting to speak first, unchallenged. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and approached the bench as if the outcome were already carved in stone. Your Honor, he began, this is a straightforward case. Ms. Rodriguez signed a non-compete agreement prohibiting her from working on or distributing similar technology for a period of 12 months following her termination. We have evidence she violated this agreement. I forced myself to stay still. Calm, collected. He continued. Additionally, we have reason to believe she attempted to profit from intellectual property belonging to Langston Tech. Specifically, the proprietary algorithm developed during her employment. He glanced at me briefly with a smug smile before returning to the judge. And we intend to show that Ms. Rodriguez has caused substantial financial harm to the company, undermining our client's market position and ongoing investor negotiations. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. Proceed. He launched into a rehearsed speech about internal security systems, code ownership, employment contracts. He projected emails, selectively chosen to paint me as disorganized, inexperienced, impulsive. Each fact was carved out of context, rearranged to make me appear careless. When he finished, Andrew leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. The gesture said everything he didn't have to say out loud. Checkmate. The judge turned her attention to me. Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to respond? I stood, feeling my pulse throb behind my ribs. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom was quiet enough that the hum of the fluorescent lights felt deafening. I walked to the center, opened the blue folder, and handed copies to the clerk. This, I said, is the patent filing for the algorithm in question. The judge lifted the document. Her eyebrows rose. I continued, my voice steadier than before. It was filed while I was employed at Langston Tech, but it was not filed under the company's name. I swallowed, forcing myself not to rush. It was filed under mine. Andrew sat forward suddenly, his chair screeching. His attorney whipped his head toward him, eyes narrowing. The judge read the inventor line again, then looked at me. Ms. Rodriguez, are you claiming sole ownership? Yes, Your Honor. Legally and factually. Andrew's attorney stepped forward quickly. Your Honor, the company has full rights. Do you have documentation showing the inventor assigned the patent to the company? She asked. He faltered. We will provide it. When? The judge pressed. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, the room shifted. I opened the red folder. The company never completed the assignment paperwork. I have written confirmation from the U.S. Patent Office verifying that no transfer of ownership was filed. I handed the letter to the clerk, who brought it to the judge. Andrew's attorney looked at the document, then at Andrew, whose face had gone still. Too still. I wasn't done. Furthermore, I said. Langston Tech's non-compete agreement only applies to company-owned intellectual property, not personally owned work, and certainly not patented material belonging to someone else. A ripple went through the gallery. Andrew's attorney tried again. Your Honor, this must be some mistake. Ms. Rodriguez was a junior developer at the time. She couldn't possibly... I opened the yellow folder. The final exhibit. Here are the commit logs, I said, showing every line of code I authored. Every version. Every update. Every timestamp. All tied to my employee ID. The judge flipped through the pages, slowly, methodically. Then she looked at Andrew. You filed a lawsuit claiming she stole technology she legally owns? Andrew's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd entered the courtroom, his confidence cracked. Your Honor, his attorney said, voice thinner now. We were under the impression... The impression, I said, cutting him off, that I wouldn't fight back. A dangerous silence followed. Then the judge leaned forward, her tone sharper than before. Mr. Langston, your claims appear unsupported, extremely unsupported. Unless you have irrefutable evidence contradicting these documents, this case may be dismissed. Andrew's attorney whispered something urgent to him. Andrew didn't react. He just stared at me, confusion mixing with something else. Fear. And then the judge said words I'll never forget. Ms. Rodriguez, do you intend to bring a counterclaim? I felt my breath catch. Not yet. Not now. This wasn't the moment. But it was coming. Before I could answer, Andrew finally spoke, his voice cracking at the edges. Your Honor, we request a recess. A request rooted in panic. The judge sighed. 15 minutes. The gavel tapped. Andrew stood, turned sharply, and walked out. His attorney followed, whispering harshly. Their confidence evaporated in seconds. I stayed where I was, gripping the edge of the defendant's table. It wasn't over. Not even close. Because owning the patent was only the beginning. What I'd uncovered in the logs, in the emails, in the financial records during those sleepless nights, that was the real story. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled faintly of old coffee and industrial cleaner. I leaned against the cold wall, taking slow breaths, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me. For months I'd imagined this moment, Andrew finally seeing the truth. But imagining it was one thing. Watching his face go pale in real time was something else entirely. 15 minutes. That's all the recess gave me to process it. And to prepare for what I knew was coming next. Because Andrew Langston wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. If anything, panic would make him more dangerous. I opened my laptop. The screen flickered as usual and pulled up a folder labeled AL Backup. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't even unauthorized access. These were files I had saved during my employment. Bug reports, logs, progress notes. Things I had sent to myself to work on at home when Andrew insisted our deadlines were non-negotiable. But when I sorted them by date 2 nights before the hearing, something strange happened. I saw a folder I didn't recognize. /CEO-private. The timestamp was from my last week at the company. I hadn't created it. I hadn't even opened it until that night. Inside were documents with naming conventions I'd never used. Projected investor deck, Q2 revision, emergency capital strategy, patent assurances speech notes, acquisition conditions, confidential. At first, I didn't understand. Then I started reading, and the cracks in Andrew's empire began to show. Langston Tech wasn't preparing for expansion. It wasn't negotiating fundraising rounds like Andrew claimed. It was sinking. Not just a little. Not just slowly. Catastrophically. 6 failed rounds of investment. 2 major clients prepared to terminate contracts due to instability. A quiet internal audit that found significant financial mismanagement. And then 1 document froze me entirely. Investor assurance plan. We must secure full ownership of the patent before Q3 or risk immediate withdrawal of funding. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why he fired me, why he sued me, why he needed to crush me publicly. It was never about protecting intellectual property. It was about survival. His. The courtroom door opened. The bailiff called for the parties to return. I closed the laptop, grabbed my folders, and walked back inside. Andrew and his attorney were already seated. He wasn't smirking now. If anything, he looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't concrete. It was ice. The judge returned. Court is back in session. Andrew's attorney rose immediately. Your Honor, we'd like to request additional time to present further documentation regarding the patent. No, the judge said. You filed a serious claim without proper verification. Proceed with your defense or we move to dismissal. His attorney stiffened. I could almost feel Andrew's breath hitch. Very well, the attorney said tightly. We will proceed. He attempted to reframe the narrative, arguing the patent had always been intended for company use, that the paperwork was an administrative oversight, that Andrew had relied in good faith on internal processes. But every point was riddled with holes. When he finished, the judge turned to me. Ms. Rodriguez, do you have anything additional to present at this time? I opened the laptop and took a breath. Yes, Your Honor, I do. I walked to the projector and displayed the first slide, the internal investor deck. Murmurs filled the courtroom. This document, I said carefully, was stored on my work drive under a folder created by Mr. Langston during my final week. I did not alter it. I did not create it. But it references my patent, by name, as essential to maintaining investor confidence. Andrew's attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is confidential corporate information. Your client sued her. The judge interrupted without looking at him. If this information is relevant to her defense, it is admissible. I continued. This investor deck claims the company owns the algorithm, but ownership was never transferred. They told investors it was secured. It wasn't. Slide after slide showed projections tied directly to technology Andrew didn't legally control. The room shifted from interest to discomfort to something like shock. But I wasn't done. Your Honor, I said, selecting one more document. This internal audit report indicates mismanagement within Langston Tech. I present it not to attack Mr. Langston personally, but to demonstrate motive. Andrew's attorney sputtered. This is outrageous. Motive? The judge repeated, leaning forward. Yes, Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice steady. Mr. Langston was under pressure, severe pressure. Investors were threatening to pull out unless he secured full rights to the patent. I paused, letting each word land. He tried to get those rights through force rather than law. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to touch. Andrew stared at the table. His attorney rubbed his forehead. The judge folded her hands. Ms. Rodriguez, she asked quietly, are you saying the plaintiff filed this lawsuit as a means of financial self-preservation? Yes, Your Honor, I believe so. Andrew's voice finally broke through, raw and shaky. That's not what happened. But the judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. She glanced from Andrew to his attorney to the mountain of evidence now overshadowing their original claims. This case has taken a very serious turn. A turn Andrew never expected. The judge's words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to split open. Andrew lowered his eyes to the table as if avoiding her gaze could somehow slow the inevitable. His attorney adjusted his glasses, flipping through papers that clearly offered nothing helpful. I watched them both. Two men who entered the courtroom certain I'd crumble, now scrambling for footing they no longer had. Mr. Langston, the judge said, her voice firm. Given the evidence presented, I am inclined to question the validity of your claims. Before I make a decision, I'm giving you the opportunity to respond directly. Andrew lifted his head. His face, usually composed with the polished confidence of a CEO, was flushed and uneven. When he finally spoke, his voice wavered. Your Honor, none of this is what it looks like. The judge leaned back. Then explain it. He swallowed. I saw the exact moment he realized there was no answer that would save him. Not legally. Not morally. Not professionally. His attorney stepped in quickly. Your Honor, we request permission to approach and clarify some points in private conference. Denied, she said sharply. This is a public hearing. A few whispers stirred in the gallery. Andrew's shoulders slumped. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. So tired of being afraid of this man. Tired of running. Tired of doubting myself. But the tiredness came with something else. A clarity I hadn't had before. Andrew exhaled shakily, then spoke again. There was pressure. Yes, investors. They wanted assurances. The patent was critical. The algorithm was everything. But I didn't intend to. To what? The judge interrupted. File a lawsuit based on false claims? Misrepresent ownership to potential investors? Attempt to use the legal system to intimidate a former employee? Andrew's lips parted, but no words came out. The judge turned to me. Ms. Rodriguez, do you have further evidence you wish to present? I hesitated. Not because I didn't have more. I had plenty. Too much, maybe. But something in me shifted in that moment. Watching Andrew unravel didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it would. It just reminded me how much he'd gambled. How desperately he'd tried to protect an image that was already collapsing. Still, the truth mattered. Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly. I'd like to submit one more document. I opened my bag and took out the printed copy of the internal audit summary. The version I'd shown earlier only highlighted the mismanagement. This version included something else, something bigger. When the clerk handed it to the judge, she scanned the first page, then her eyes narrowed. This indicates unauthorized fund reallocations, she said. Substantial ones. Andrew stiffened. His attorney stepped forward as if he could physically block her from reading. Your Honor, he said, voice cracking slightly. We object to the relevance. It's relevant to motive, the judge replied, and very relevant to credibility. She continued reading. Every second that passed drained more color from Andrew's face. This audit suggests that Mr. Langston diverted funds earmarked for R&D into accounts unrelated to company operations, and that he attempted to backfill the losses by securing full ownership of the defendant's patent. Silence. Dead, perfect silence. Finally, the judge set the papers down. Mr. Langston, she said softly, do you have an explanation? He shook his head, just barely. It wasn't a no. It was a surrender. I watched him. This man who once strutted across the office, bragging about investors, lecturing us about innovation, now reduced to a fragile version of himself. Not because he lost, but because he never expected to be held accountable. After several long moments, the judge spoke again. I am prepared to rule. However, before I do, she paused, glancing between us. I want to ask Ms. Rodriguez one question. My breath caught. Do you wish to proceed with a counterclaim? The courtroom tilted for a moment as every eye turned to me. I had imagined this moment too many times to count. Imagined standing tall, listing every wrong he'd done, unleashing the full force of the evidence. I had built the case. I had every document, every timeline, every justification. But imagining revenge and facing it were different things. Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I believe the court needs to hear the truth. All of it. But I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to clear my name. Andrew's eyes lifted at that, hope flickering for the first time. But I wasn't finished. However, I continued, if the plaintiff continues this lawsuit or files another baseless claim, I will pursue a counterclaim for damages. It was fair. It was controlled. It was enough. The judge nodded. Understood. Then she faced Andrew and his attorney. This lawsuit appears to be an attempt to leverage legal pressure to reclaim a patent that does not belong to the plaintiff. It is beyond inappropriate. It is abusive. She lifted her gavel. My ruling will reflect that. The decision that followed was more devastating for Andrew than anything I could have asked for. Because what happened after the hearing was something I never expected, something that changed the course of everything that came next. The judge lifted the gavel, took one breath, and delivered the ruling that ended everything. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff's claims lack legal merit and appear to have been filed in bad faith. Court costs are awarded to the defendant. The sound of the gavel striking wood echoed like a crack of lightning. It was over. Just like that. No dramatic outburst. No final argument. Just the truth, laid bare. The kind of truth that destroys an empire built on lies. I stood there for a moment, hands shaking, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me finally loosened. For the first time in months, I wasn't fighting to breathe. Andrew didn't stand. He didn't even look up. His attorney whispered something to him, but he just sat hunched over, face buried in his hands, the weight of the ruling pressing down on him like 1,000 pounds. I didn't feel victory, not the way I expected. What I felt was release. I gathered my folders, slid my laptop into my bag, and turned to leave. I was halfway to the door when I heard it. Mia. His voice, small, cracked, unrecognizable. I turned around slowly. Andrew stood, eyes red, tie crooked, his whole image shattered. The last time he'd said my name, it was with arrogance, like he was speaking to someone beneath him. This time it was different. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, stepping toward me. I was trying to keep the company alive. You have to understand. Everything was falling apart. I held his gaze. I know, I said quietly. That's why you fired me. Why you sued me. Why you lied. He swallowed. I was desperate. I was too, I said, but I didn't hurt anyone to survive. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say more. Apologize, maybe. Explain. Justify. But there are some things you can't justify, and we both knew it. His attorney called his name and the moment ended. I walked out of the courtroom and into the afternoon light. The sky was clear, cruelly bright, considering how heavy everything felt. I sat on the courthouse steps and exhaled for what felt like the first time in a year. Freedom. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that feels like finally loosening a knot you forgot was there. In the weeks that followed, the fallout hit Andrew harder than any ruling ever could. 3 major investors withdrew. 2 board members resigned. A journalist from a tech publication reached out after someone leaked the internal audit. 2 months later, Langston Tech filed for voluntary restructuring. Andrew stepped down as CEO. The man who once bragged about his unstoppable vision was now fighting to keep the company from dissolving entirely. I didn't comment publicly. I never posted anything on social media. I didn't attend interviews or write a blog exposing what had happened. My silence wasn't loyalty. It was peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with the truth and let the world do the rest. As for me, things changed slowly. The lawsuit dismissal lifted the freeze on my job prospects, but I didn't rush back into tech. I spent time rebuilding myself. Sleeping, breathing, remembering what it felt like to exist without dread pressing against my chest. Eventually, I launched something I never thought I'd have the courage for. A small consulting firm. Just me, my laptop, and the patent I still owned. Companies reached out. Not because they felt sorry for me, but because my work spoke for itself. I chose my clients carefully. I chose my schedule carefully. I chose myself carefully. One morning, 6 months after the hearing, I received an email. From Andrew, just 2 sentences. Mia, I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time, reading the words again and again. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of acceptance. Some apologies come too late to fix anything. Some wounds close, but never forget what cut them. My favorite moment came a year later, though. I'd been invited to speak at a small tech meetup. Nothing big, maybe 40 people in a co-working space. After my talk, a young woman approached me, nervous, wide-eyed. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course." "I almost quit my job last month," she said. "My boss kept taking credit for my work. Made me feel small. But then, I heard your story. Someone mentioned it at a networking event, and it helped me fight back. I just wanted to say thank you." I felt something in my chest crack open in the best possible way. Not revenge, not triumph. Impact. Grandpa used to say, "Your work is your voice when you're not in the room." I finally understood what he meant. Walking home that night, I realized the message I'd been carrying since the day I pushed that heavy courtroom door open. When someone tries to erase you, the most powerful revenge is to stay visible. Not to ruin them, but to rise past them. My life didn't end in that courtroom. It started there. And if I learned anything, it's this. Always document your work. Always guard your name. Always stand up, especially when someone powerful expects you to break. Because sometimes the only difference between losing everything and reclaiming everything is the moment you decide your story isn't over yet.